Hey class, Dr. Colvin King here. Thanks for a great couple of weeks of Intro to Soc 101. Just to recap, it's important for you to get a good handle on the three oldest perspectives in sociology. Let's recap a little bit. First, structural functional perspective. Remember that the perspectives are simply a way in which you view the world, the lens through which you understand and experience certain phenomena in society. So, if you're a structural functionalist, you tend to see society as a body. Imagine if the social institutions were, say, organs in the body. And if one of the organs were to suddenly get sick or break down, it would have a deleterious effect on the entire body or society. And remember that those organs or institutions are the family, government, education, the economy, and religion. There are several others, but we talk about the major five. Some of the key theorists in structural functionalism are Emile Durkheim, the father of sociology, and Robert K. Merton. They look at the manifest or the intended consequences of certain institutions like the family. Of course, the intended consequence of the family is to provide love, support, nurturing to family members. If it dysfunctions, well, that means we're not getting the love, support, or nurturing that we need. Again, structural functionalism is a macro theory, meaning that it sees behavior or society from a large perspective. If you've ever flown in a plane and you look down and you see the entire landscape, you can see cars, homes, land, all at once. That's how you would see society if you were a structural functionalist. The second oldest theory, social conflict perspective. Social conflict perspective was founded by Karl Marx in Germany during the mid-18th century at the turn of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution had a marked impact on human behavior because it changed life forever. Social conflict looks at society also from a macro perspective and looks at the naturally opposing objectives of groups or categories of people. For instance, capitalists versus workers. The main goal of a capitalist is to make money, and the biggest expense that any capitalist has is, you guessed it, wages, paying salary or payroll. And your job or your goal as a worker is to make the most money you can make. Karl Marx said, this is naturally oppositional. It can't possibly work. But it has. But are there inherent situations or problems with it? Absolutely. So, social conflict was created from the naturally opposing goals or objectives of capitalists versus workers. But then we have Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, who looked at the conflict between the races, particularly in America, blacks versus African Americans. So, critical race theory is a layer of social conflict perspective. And if you are a social conflict perspective or a Du Boisian as in terms of race, then you look at situation through the lens of race. Any situation. It can be education, the family. But if you look at how groups of people or institutions engage or interact with different races, then you would be a critical race theorist. Feminist theory is also another layer of social conflict perspective because it looks at the objectives between men versus women. The inherent thing that you must know about conflict perspective is that it's about a struggle for resources, power, and control, or the lack thereof. It's not about conflict between individuals. It's about conflict between categories. the old versus the young, the haves versus the have-nots, Americans versus everybody else. Okay, so keep that in mind. Again, a macro perspective. The last perspective of sociology is symbolic interaction. Symbolic interaction, unlike the first two, is actually a micro theory. So it does emphasize individual interactions between people. What does my body language mean? You've got to know. You've got to pick up on different cues about what they mean, right? And so if I'm sitting like this, what does that mean? What is that trying to convey? That would be symbolic interaction. So what that means is everything that a person does has consequences. And so if you're a symbolic interactionist, you look at the world through many, or MINI, interactions or engagements with people. For instance, here's an example. Let's say you walked into the house and I'm sitting on the couch and I say, I'm hungry. And you say, well, I'm about to head back out. And I suddenly throw my keys at you and hit you in the head. And it hurts. It kind of hits pretty hard. What did that interaction mean? Right. Not that I wanted to hurt you by throwing the keys at you or that I was mad, but rather you said you were about to leave and I threw my keys. It means I'm hungry, go get me something to eat. So you have to be keen on what certain behaviors mean if you're a symbolic interactionist. I find that a lot of times Americans tend to be symbolic interactionists because of our rugged individualism and our emphasis on personability and personal accountability. We often will say things like, people want to do this, or people don't want to work, or people don't want to own homes. And I'm not sure whether or not that's an appropriate explanation for why some people do the things they do. Okay,